Hello everybody, my name is Connor Nielsen and I will be, for the foreseeable future, a member of the main Geekvolution crew. You might remember me from Who Reviews the Reviewer Season 4. I've been on videos here and there with Rasco, Steve Baxley, and Captain Logan, as well as just a general fan and commenter on Geekvolution for a while now. So the other members of the main crew have given me questions to answer, kind of a la the Geekvolution Rebirth initiative that happened earlier this year. So without further ado, here are the questions. The Curious Low asks, what was the very first geeky obsession or fandom that you fell into, and how did you discover it? Are you still a big fan of it now? So I like to think of my childhood in 3 phases. There was Star Wars, Godzilla, and James Bond. And those are like the 3 key fandoms that I've had throughout my life. I don't remember the moment I fell in love with Star Wars. It's just always been. So I can't really answer the question there. I don't remember which came first, the Godzilla or the James Bond. But I remember I knew about Godzilla and I knew about James Bond just through cultural things. And I knew there was a lot of movies. And I went to video stores all the time as a kid with my twin brother. So there was this, and I would see James Bond movies and I would see Godzilla movies everywhere. And they had a pretty good selection between the 3 video stores in my immediate area. And I went online and I looked up, which movies came first. So I spent a good chunk of my childhood just watching James Bond movies and watching Godzilla movies, Toho Godzilla movies. I didn't watch the 98 Godzilla movie till much later. And I fell in love with them, and when I was young, I would be all about the Godzilla. I'd make my own monsters, I would create my own James Bond missions to go on. I was all about the James Bond and all about the Godzilla. And not to mention, I grew up in the prequel era of Star Wars. I think Revenge of the Sith came out when I was 9 or 10, and I was all about just Star Wars fever back then. So those are the 3 key fandoms that have made me up, and you can bet it. I went to go see Shin Godzilla, and I look forward to all of the James Bond movies. Whether they're good or bad, I will watch them, and to some degree I will like them, because I cannot be objective when it comes to Godzilla. Rasco asks, if you could go back in time and watch any movie during its original theatrical release, what movie would it be? This is a really cool question, and in case you didn't know, film is my thing. I love movies. I work at a movie theater. I try to watch every single movie that comes into the theater. I try to. I have school and work to get to before that, and now videos to make for Geekvolution. But this is an awesome question because the obvious go-to one would be Star Wars. And I don't want to go Star Wars. I mean, I would, but my initial thought was, okay, movies with big twist endings, I'd really like to see the way the audiences responded to those for the first time. But then I thought, I could just bring over a couple of friends who never saw The Prestige or never saw Sixth Sense or never saw Fight Club and just get them to watch it and then see the reaction of, so I decided maybe not. And then I thought, what is a historically significant film that I really like that I would just like to see on a cultural level how it changed? And I thought, well, Jaws. But then I thought, no, I'm going to go even further. There's a film that to this day, the original theatrical cut has not been fully found, and there are still missing pieces, even though we have found a lot of the missing footage, and that is Fritz Lang's 1927 masterpiece, Metropolis. And it is a German silent expressionist film. I love Metropolis. It is amazing, but it's super important on an influential level. It's so awesome. But even today, the complete Metropolis that they released on Blu-ray, there are still scenes missing from that, even though they found a really long 2-hour, 30-minute, 2-hour, 45-minute cut. And while there might be German titles, to say what the dialogue is, it's a silent film, so much of it is communicated through acting and visual storytelling that I think I could understand it. And just to see what it was like there, and I know no one liked it when it came out in Germany, but still, to watch it and have the knowledge of how it's all meant to be put together, that would be something to behold. So that is my reaction. The original opening night release of the German original Fritz Lang cut of Metropolis. I'm going to go with that. Captain Logan asks, What kind of stories do you most prefer to consume in comic book form, and what kind of stories do you most prefer to consume in movie form? So I like that he asked me this, because I didn't really think about it until I read this question, but I do prefer more, like, certain stories more in movie form and certain stories more in comic book form. I'm going to go with movie form first because it's the easy answer I got. Survival stories. I love man/woman, just people besting the elements versus nature. They're just trying to survive. I really dig it, and it's something I've always liked since I was a kid. I watch every season of Survivor, the reality TV show, because that's just what I like. The Shallows was a recent movie that, it's not a great movie, but I really liked it because it was just Blake Lively trying to survive a shark for an hour and a half. It was great. And then my favorite kind of genre is science fiction, so when you got Matt Damon trying to survive on Mars for over a year, the movie, I'm in heaven. So I really like man versus nature, survival stories, besting the elements. I love that's my go-to just knack for film stories. I love that. But when it comes to comics, it is a little bit different. I like the really convoluted, unconventional origin story, because what I like about something in this that I like it better in this form than I do in movie form is because it's still a visual medium, but because you can read and you have control over the pacing and you can just flip around and see, how this reveal, how it was seeded. You can go back and look at where it was going the whole time. And I guess the best example I can give right now is what Gerard Way is doing right now in Doom Patrol, where it is just completely bonkers crazy. Who is this guy that everyone's talking about? What is really going on? Everything's a little unclear, but the main character is just as confused by everything and trying to get a grasp on what's going on as I am. And it's a really nice way to hold on to that, and the pieces are starting to fall together, and she's starting to get a sense of what's happening, the same sense I am, and I might be a little bit ahead of her, but I'm sure that there will be a moment where we're on the same page. And then Batman Zero Year. It's my favorite Batman story. Not the best Batman story, but just my personal favorite, because it is not just the copy and paste Batman story. It's kind of unconventional, where and even Scott Snyder says it's the anti-Year One. It's very sci-fi, and then it becomes a Batman versus nature survival story at the end with Commando Batman, which is the best thing in the world. But it's told in 3 acts, and each act is like a 4-part story arc, and we get different sides of Bruce and how he was brought up, and we get, and each story informs a different side of the Batman persona, and the way the pieces start to fall together, it's really cool, and it's something that I really gravitate towards. And going back into the pages to see where everything was set up so you can see the payoff, I think works better in a comic book than it does, say, in a movie. Because a lot of the times you can't have pacing over that dialogue in a movie. You just can't. So I don't know what you would call that. I'm just going to call it the unconventional origin story. Dan asks, what is your favorite novel that hasn't been adapted into any other medium yet? So I really like comic books. I really like movies. I don't read a lot of novels. I do read, I have occasionally read novels. I just don't read them a whole lot. And the only novel that I can think of that I've read that hasn't been turned into a movie or a TV show or what have you is probably the only one anyone else can think of, and that's The Catcher in the Rye. I love The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is awesome and it's great, but I also feel it's the go-to answer, but it's my answer. That's a story that I don't think can really be properly translated. It's so internal. It's all character and a very loose plot. It's all character, though, and you can do that in film, but that transition won't translate well, and it really can't really translate. If it can't translate to film that well, it definitely won't translate to the stage very well, and I don't know how you do a TV show out of that, or a miniseries. I don't know. It's very much a novel, and it knows its medium very well, and Holden Caulfield and the way his stream of consciousness just constantly contradicts itself, it's really fascinating, and it's for the novel form. So yeah, I guess it's that, because Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, they've all been translated into films. Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, they've all been translated to other mediums. The Real Menos asks, what bad movie do you think can be remade into a good film? these next two questions do have a similar premise, and which is revolving around bad movies or movies that aren't entirely successful on their own terms. So these next couple of questions, I'm going to go to movies that have been rather recent, because me religiously going to the movies to watch everything I can has been only for about the last 3 years, give or take. So it's going to be something from there, because if you go back further and you watch something like legendarily bad, like a Troll 2, Batman and Robin, Birdemic, whatever, those movies are just really bad, and they're kind of good because they're bad. And the good movies you watch back then, well, they're famous for being good films. So, I don't know. And I also haven't watched very many really bad older movies. So the next couple of answers are going to be from recent films. My go-to answer for this would be a movie that came out last January called Project Almanac. That is a movie that is a handheld shaky cam found footage movie. It's time travel is involved. It was going to be called Welcome to Yesterday. Then it got moved to a later date and was called Project Almanac. And that is a movie that has really good ideas, not groundbreaking new ideas, but it's got good ideas, and there's a romance there, there's some character interactions there, and there's stuff with fathers and sons, and some fun takes on the way things float, and fun little sci-fi kitschy stuff that in a better story and a better directed film, and just in a different style, just you don't have to make it handheld. I think that movie would have been better. And I remember leaving the theater, and it was a bad movie, but I wasn't angry. In fact, I was kind of happy, because I turned to my brother, and you have to remember, this is January. This is the graveyard of movie times. And I turned to him, I'm like, that wasn't a good movie. In fact, it was pretty bad, but there was ideas there. I would like to see this movie get remade. And I've always thought that since I've seen it, so my idea would be Project Almanac. Just give it a better script and tell the story in a better way. So, there's my answer. And Red Brown Coat Shirt Eric says, which film do you believe could work better in novel form? So like a previous question, I don't really read a whole lot of novels, but I do understand the novel and prose medium pretty well. It's a much better way of getting into people's heads and internalizing things. And when we have movies that are very restrained and quiet, and the acting is not very verbalized, it is all internal, you run the risk of not really getting into the person's head. And this was a question that I just couldn't get my head around, because, the Bourne movies. I've never felt like I've ever gotten into Jason Bourne's head. Oh wait, they're based on novels. There are a lot of movies that are based on novels. And I was thinking about movies that I've seen recently, because those are the better examples of, they're more fresh in my mind. And I could cheat and say, Jason Bourne, because it's not based on any of the novels. But I thought, how about A Bigger Splash? Because that's a movie that I think would have, because there's two really uninteresting characters, because I don't think the actors are really getting into them. Maybe that would work better in novel form. A Bigger Splash is based off of another movie. Okay, it's a remake. I could go with that. But that other movie's based off of a book, so it doesn't count. So I'm going to go with a movie called The Lobster. The Lobster is a movie that came out, it was in limited release, it was a smaller indie movie that a lot of people kind of lost their minds over, and I was a little disappointed in it. It's not a bad movie, I don't think, but it's a very quiet movie. Everyone is restrained, and they kind of have to be. It's about characters that just can't connect with people, and it's a movie about if you get left by a spouse, or you're just not in a relationship anymore, you have to go to this hotel and you have to find love in X amount of days, or you get turned into an animal of your choice. That's just the way it works. I don't know if this is based off of a novel, so if it is, I'm sorry. But there's pathos to these characters, and there's this lack of communication and human interaction where people are just forcing themselves to try to fall in love. And so there is that disconnect, and everyone almost plays their characters the same way, and it's on purpose. And while this is all interesting, I really want to get into these characters' heads more than I do. On one hand, with this sort of style, you get the Kubrick. Like The Shining, Jack Nicholson, there's like a good 45 minutes where Jack Nicholson just doesn't really talk at all. But I feel like I'm getting into his head. And I know a lot of filmmakers try to do that, and they're just not always successful. And that's what made Kubrick great. So The Lobster is my answer for that, because Colin Farrell and Ben Whishaw and John C. Reilly, I wanted to get more into their heads. And there's even a girl that, there's like a room service girl, I don't know the correct, but there's a reveal about her character that's really interesting, and I almost wish this could be written as like one of those, like Bram Stoker's Dracula or Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, where it's all in journal entries, where people are expressing their feelings and thoughts through journal entries, and I think that would have been really cool to kind of get a little grab of each and everyone else. So it's a little unreliable narrator, but you also get that humanity from the characters that I think the movie was just missing. So that's all of my questions. Thank you guys very much. I thought a lot about these questions. And hello, Geekvolution crowd. I look forward to making videos for you.